Good morning. Welcome to the Seeker's Quest. Thank you for coming today. I'm Radha and I'm here with Chaitanya Charan. We call him CC, and Veda. How are you guys this morning?
Yeah, I am surviving the attacks of a controversy. Mm.
Controversy.
And I don't know whether the controversy is going to survive or I am going to survive. Let us see.
Wow,
Mm.
I'm intrigued. Controversy.
Controversy always survives.
Yeah, but the key to surviving a controversy is to just wait for another controversy to come.
That's fair.
Mm. So, how are you, Veda?
I am I'm doing better than I deserve today.
I'm surprised that you realized this today.
I tell myself that, then I start realizing it. What did I just say?
Mm. So, how are you doing, Radha?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm here in Nashville. I'm going to an investor conference, which is interesting. Um, my husband's nephew has a lot of success in investing and invited us to this conference. And it's basically, to even go to this conference, you have to be like a multi-millionaire. And they basically all get together and they talk about their businesses and how they set them up. And then they all give each other advice. And it's a really nice environment. People are really kind to each other. And it's almost like a family. But as I'm like meeting them all and listening to them all and talking to them all, I'm like, oh, I just want to give them Krishna so much, because they have on these, like, my nephew's like, oh, you see that watch that guy has on? That's a $300,000 watch. And I'm like, man, the things you could do in spiritual life with this amount of resources that would make you so much happier than buying a $300,000 watch and a garage of Ferraris. But it's very interesting, learning a lot. So anyway, that's where I am, Nashville. And I get to visit my good friend, Cindy Lunsford. I get to stay with her. She's starting a bhakti center here in Nashville. She's super empowered. So her and her partner are doing that. So it's exciting learning about that as well. So yeah, that's what's going on in my life.
Wonderful. Mhm.
Yeah. But
So, So I
go
was
ahead.
thinking, yeah, I was thinking that about this controversy. There's this whole theme of Bhagavad Gita in popular culture. Hmm? And that's how I made some reflections, and they became a minor controversy here. But I was thinking we could discuss this. Can you permit me to share my screen?
Yes.
So, in general, what I've noticed is that there are everything that we do, in, there is our action, and what we do before that itself, there is the world has a perception of who we are and what we are doing. So, for example, we all have a particular conception of, say, the Bhagavad Gita. So, now there's a particular conception of that in India, there's a particular conception of that in the West. Now, we could say most people may not even know about the Bhagavad Gita. That's possibly true, but some of them do know. So, now broadly in philosophy, this is a big question that say if this is the substance, and then we have the, let me put it another way here, rightly. See, we have a particular conception of the substance. Okay, why is it? Okay. So, okay, put it this way. I have a particular conception of the substance, and you have a particular conception of the substance. Hmm? And in some ways, when we say that we are arriving at truth, truth is basically a process of increasing alignment between conception and reality, or conception and substance. Hmm? So we can't really know everything completely, or even anything completely. But if it's more and more aligned, the better it is. So if I'm going too philosophical, let me know. I'll make it a little more philosophical then.
No, I'm thinking of like an elephant, and like if there's like somebody staring at the elephant's tail and somebody staring at the elephant's leg, and they're each describing what an elephant is based off of that vantage point. And then when they both zoom out, they see the whole thing and they see that it's the same. But in the meantime, when they're so zoomed in on that particular body part, that's what they're convinced is an elephant. Is that kind of what you're explaining?
Yeah, good example. Yes, I don't know whether to be annoyed or pleased. I thought I I thought I was making a profound concept, and you made it so simple.
No, it's great.
No. So it's good. I think very nice. So the point is that you could say in this particular, there is Indian popular culture, and then there is Western popular culture.
So what you
And
drew here is the Gita, and you're saying that Western popular culture understands it maybe a little bit differently than Indian popular culture.
yes, I think the conception or the prominent image is different. And this clash of conceptions actually came out in this blockbuster movie Oppenheimer, that is currently doing quite well in India as well as in the West. Hmm?
So this
Incidentally,
controversy is over the Gita and
yes,
and what it is and what it isn't.
in the Oppenheimer movie, the depiction of the Gita.
Mm.
But the controversy is over that. So, by the way, it seems that so you have. I'll go into the movie soon. That's the idea of popular culture. But Veda, you have been unusually silent. Hmm.
I'm quite intrigued about this movie that I've never seen, and everyone is talking about it. So I'm wondering, I'm
Okay.
happy to see this movie through your eyes, so I don't have to watch it.
Oh, okay. So I can become your movie watcher. Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Did you see this movie, Cece?
See, I'm much more of a verbal person than a visual person. You give me a choice between watching a movie and reading the review of a movie, I would much more prefer reading the review. So I've read many reviews of the movie. I saw some scenes from it, and I've read a lot about Oppenheimer before. So and so when I comment on my social media on movies, I say specifically say what I'm offering is not a review of the movie. I'm offering more of reflections on the movie. Hmm. So yeah, so
Okay.
I know more or less the storyline of the movie, and okay, so I'll talk about it. I'll give some introduction, and then we can discuss the controversy.
So maybe
So
maybe some of us haven't seen the movie, so you have to give us a little
okay, yeah, sure. So
storyline.
Oppenheimer, this is more or less like a biography of biography's life. So Oppenheimer is a scientist known as the father of the atomic bomb. So he was the person who led the research in what is known as the Manhattan Project. So this project started when rumors started surfacing among the allies that uh, Hitler was on the verge of developing some atom bombs, and that's when Einstein and some other scientists wrote to Eisenhower, the American president, saying that America needs to develop these weapons. So all this is depicted in the movie. The movie is by directed by Christopher Nolan, who is known to be like a little bit of abstruse director. So the timeline is wavering; it goes backward and forward. So, but anyway, the broad storyline is it describes how mm, the movie describes how Oppenheimer came to lead the project. So basically, the key part is roughly 1943 to 45. So 43 more or less the project started, and 45 the project ended in the sense that the atom bomb was first tried out in New Mexico in what was called as a Trinity test, and then it was actually dropped in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And now after that, there are some more incidents also described in the movie, and some incidents are described after that or before that also, his previous life. So now, when he developed the atom bomb, he it was especially in when it was tested, the Mexico testing was done. That's the time he quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, a verse 11:32. This verse basically says, "Kalosmi lokakshetra pravritto," time I am, the destroyer of the worlds. The translation he had was, "Death I have become." Now, this is not the literal translation, but this is a translation that Oppenheimer had, destroyer of the worlds. And this is what he quoted. Now, this was not the only time Oppenheimer quoted the Bhagavad Gita. It seems that when he was studying science, he was fascinated by East and Eastern wisdom. And in fact, in his university, he learned Sanskrit so that he could study the Gita and a few other Sanskrit books in their original language. And he later on said that Gita is one of the top 10 influencers in his life, the books that influenced him the most. He's also quoted to have said that the Gita is the most beautiful philosophical song ever written in human history. So he did quote it many times. And now in this particular context, when he quoted the Gita, it's a significant that he's quoted this verse. So apart from this also, he seems to have talked about the Gita to a few people. When I think FDR Roosevelt passed away, at his memorial, he gave him in the memorial, he distributed Gitas to people. But let's look specifically at this comment which he made. What was his thinking when he quoted this particular verse from the Gita? So that's the history of his relationship with the Gita. And he is depicted as having quoted the Gita when the test explosion succeeds. So should I go ahead or you want to add
This
something?
is good.
Okay. So now, basically, the ethics were quite perplexing, agonizing, in fact. Is developing this atom bomb because they all knew, scientists knew how much destructive power would be unleashed by this. And yet, the fact was that now the development of the atom bomb, developing the bomb, would lead to destruction, but not developing it could lead to maybe greater destruction. Because if a person like Hitler got his hands on it, then he, as a tyrant, might actually use it for far greater harm to the world. So, in many ways, at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, this was Arjuna's dilemma. Also, now Arjuna did not want to fight the war. So, fighting would mean death for at a large scale. But not fighting could well mean greater damage, greater destruction, greater death. Why? Because in that particular case for Arjuna, if he didn't fight, there would be the opposite side where people who were tyrants, people who were exploiters, abusers, they had done many ethically shocking things, reprehensible things, and they would continue to do that. In fact, if they won this war, then there would be nobody to challenge them after this. And thus, it was a painful situation. And in this painful situation, it is in the Gita, Krishna, the speaker of the Gita, the source of the wisdom of the Gita, who is also considered the divine descendant on the world, he is speaking that this destruction is a part of the divine plan. So that now these people, everybody gets the due of their actions, and these people, they are destined to die. So I have come as destruction, as the destructive agent over here. So the verse itself was spoken for giving solace to Arjuna. I don't think you are personally responsible for this. It is actually they by their own deeds. If they suppose a criminal has done such terrible crimes that that person is been tried and sentenced to death. Now the executor has to administer the capital punishment. So the executor doesn't have to feel guilty. So that was the idea. So did Oppenheimer think that?
Can we talk?
Yeah, let me complete this point. Did Oppenheimer think that maybe his situation was similar? Well, we will talk about the ethical lines of the Second World War a little later. They're not as black and white, certainly. But the point was that he also felt that when this destructive power was unleashed, so the destructive power basically was a reminder of something greater, reminder of divinity. Now, whether it is a personal divinity, whether a specific divinity, that's a different question. But the destructive power was a reminder of divinity. So I'll conclude with one quick point. There is this feeling of awe when we encounter something far bigger than ourselves. Now, that sense of awe originally led to this word called awesome. Although now the word awesome is just used very cheaply for anything that is good, enjoyable, excellent. The party was awesome, the food was awesome, like that we use it. But originally that was the meaning. The meaning of awesome was something which has a positive emotion associated with something spectacular, far greater than ourselves. And similarly, there's another word which also has lost its original meaning. That's awful. Awful in the past was also, it didn't have that. Now this connotation is dreadful. It's awful, it's painful, it's horrible. But again, in the past, the word awe as awful meant that something very great that also fills us with a sense of awe, but in this case, negatively. So, for example, if you go to the Himalayan mountains and stand at the base of a mountain and look up at the majestic peaks, that would be something awesome. On the other hand, if we see, say, a storm, say a cyclone has wreaked havoc in a city, and we see the destruction, that's awful. Now, if that destruction is of course awful in the sense of being dreadful, but just seeing the sheer power that could just throw away cars and knock down buildings and knock over giant trees, that fills us with a sense of awe. So Arjuna had a similar feeling. So this feeling of both the senses of awe were present in Arjuna when he saw the majestic form of destruction, majestic, what is called as the universal form, displayed by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. And we could say that to some extent, on seeing the atom bomb exploding, not in Japan, but before that in the test in the New Mexico desert, Oppenheimer also felt similar emotions. He says that when the bomb exploded, some of the scientists laughed, some of them cried, some of them were left speechless. So that's basically the idea of making sense of such a mind-numbing power. For making sense of that, he found the Bhagavad Gita's wisdom as a resource.
Wow. That's
Resource for what, though?
Sorry?
Resource for what?
Resource for making sense. Now, whether he made the sense that he made was generally what happens for us in life. If you consider pain, distress, it's always bad. But what is especially worse is meaningless pain. Somebody is injured, it's painful. But somebody is, say, injured because they take a bullet on the battlefield. That is meaningful pain. And that is much more bearable. It's pain, but it's bearable. And if somebody is just training to fight in a war and there's a freak accident and some bullet gun goes off and they are hit by a bullet, that's meaningless pain. So when you talk about bearing pain on a scale, it is much more bearable if it is meaningful, and is far less bearable if it is meaningless. So basically, wisdom, like the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, helps us to make sense of the situations in our life. And he found some resource in the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita to make sense of the choices that he was facing and the decisions he made in those choices.
So overall, he was like a well-intentioned person, you'd say.
That's a good question, because he did see what happened was by the time 1945, if you consider timeline in 1945, by the time the atom bomb was developed, Germany had already surrendered before that. So in one sense, there was no need to develop the weapon. Now, after that, the bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then Japan surrendered. Now, historians are divided whether how long the war would have gone on if if the if America had not used the atom bomb. But in general, the consensus is that maybe the use of the atom bomb was unnecessary on Japan.
Well, wait, he's not responsible for the decision to
No,
use
that's what I'm
it.
saying.
He's responsible.
I'm coming to that point, of course. So he
So,
made the weapon, and he did say to Roosevelt that, I have blood on my hands. And Roosevelt said that, no, if there's any blood, it's on my hands. And after that, Roosevelt was annoyed, and he said that, he's such a crybaby. Don't bring him in front of me ever again. He says we have to make decisions like this. So almost all the scientists, even Einstein, had great regrets, not about so much about the development of the atom bomb as the deployment of the atom bomb. And then later
can we
on,
talk about this?
yeah. So
this is what I wanted to talk about earlier when you were making the point of
okay, go ahead, please.
him. Well, you said that he was making, he was creating the atom bomb. If you go up even more, to prevent destruction, almost like, yes, the atom bomb would create destruction if used, but not creating it could potentially cause more destruction. And I just thought this was really interesting. I have a nuclear engineering background, and something I really liked about nuclear science, or when I got into it, it was what I thought it was a misunderstood energy that could be used for good. And I worked for a contractor of the Navy designing nuclear submarines, not nuclear weapons, but nuclear submarines. They're powered by nuclear power. And now I'm not doing that anymore. But as you were talking about that, I was curious as to your opinion as to that synopsis, that this conclusion that creating a bomb could be destructive, but not creating it could be more destructive. Like, what's your opinion about that logic?
You should hear the political opinion. They say it's a deterrent, that if we have a nuclear weapon, everyone will leave us alone.
Yeah, I think
that's the rationale.
Yeah, deterrence is a very important principle. You consider, now I live in India. Okay, I cannot draw a very good map of India, but if you consider this is India, then this is above it is much bigger is China. Next to India is Pakistan. Now there have been several wars between India, Pakistan, and China. The wars happened primarily between 1960s to 1980s. But in the 1980s and 1990s especially, all three countries developed nuclear weapons. Now, nuclear weapons are far worse than atomic weapons also. Now, after that, there has been no war. Now, it doesn't mean that there are no tensions. There are tensions, there are hostilities, there is cross-border terrorism, but nothing has broken out to the level of an outright war. So, does deterrence work? Well, I would say it does work. Now, how much deterrence is required for something to work is difficult to say. Say, for example, in the current war, Ukraine had its nuclear weapons. Ukraine gave up its stockpile. Maybe Russia wouldn't have attacked Ukraine if it had nuclear weapons. Now, of course, you can also say the other way that although Russia has had nuclear weapons, and although in fact it has the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world, it has not used it. Although the war has not gone the way it wanted, it has not won it as fast as it thought it would win it. It has not used nuclear weapons. So that's a quick political synopsis, a geopolitical historical synopsis. So is deterrence required? Well, we live in a world with harsh realities. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita is spoken to Arjuna, who I put it as he's a good person with no good choices, no good options. Fighting is a terrible option, but not fighting is a more terrible option. Sometimes life presents us with such situations only. Now, was the American use of the nuclear weapon of the atom bomb desirable or essential? Certainly not desirable, essential. It's difficult to say that. But more and more scholars or historians are veering toward the idea that it may not have been necessary. It did bring the war to an end. And as far as we know, now there are other weapons of mass destruction like chemical weapons and others, they have been used, but nuclear weapons or atomic weapons have not been used thereafter.
So if you were the one making that call back when he was designing it, would have you had him keep designing it and do it, or would have you had him stop and not create it?
Well, you cannot really put the genie back in the bottle. You know that story. You have genie in the bottle, you open the bottle, genie comes out. So technology is like that genie which has come out of the bottle. There's no putting it back in. You just have to make the best of a bad bargain. So if he had not made it, somebody else would have made it. Now, would we have been able to stop others from doing it? We don't know. So it's a difficult decision. In the First World War, there were many scientists. See, generally before the First World War or till the First World War, war was primarily limited to the borders. So if this is country one, this is country two. So this would be the domain of the war, where one country intrudes into other country's boundary and they fight over there. But this was war historically. But toward the end of the First World War, basically airplanes started really taking off. Air travel and airplanes became much, much bigger. And that meant that with fighter planes, you could just zoom in, drop a bomb, and come out. So war was no longer limited to planes. And no longer limited to the borders. And that is something which is unprecedented. So fighter planes, you could just drop bombs. So I would say that at least in the history of India, there are historians. Megasthenes was a Greek who wrote a book called Indica, and he says that how in war in India it was a meticulously followed principle that there were no civilians targeted during wars. Like if we consider the war that the Bhagavad Gita is describing, the Kurukshetra war, it was decided both the parties decided that we will fight at a particular place and we will follow certain course. So there were no civilian targets. So in one sense,
didn't they all like get together at night too and hang out? Like they'd fight during the day, but then at night they were like cool with each other.
Yeah, it was almost like a sports. Sports is like a test of strength and skill. So it was like that. Like if you have a sports match, if there's a cricket match, you have a bitter fight sometimes on the sports field. But after that, you come out and you may chat together, you may have lunch together, you may have dinner together. So now I don't say that it was like that in recent years, but the point was there were no civilian casualties. And one thing is certainly true that when Hiroshima and Nagasaki were chosen as targets for dropping the bombs, they were not that way major military bases, and the number of civilians there were huge. So the act of dropping the bomb there was certainly something which is deeply questionable and deeply troubling.
This is an interesting point in itself that, like, back in the day, there's this code of ethics that people follow in fighting, which now is like pretty much thrown out the window.
Yeah,
Which
if you
only
consider,
like highlights the danger of creating more destructive weapons, because the way that we're fighting, we're not really following a set code of ethics. It's really a free for all in a lot of ways.
oh yeah, in fact, the terrorism is exactly opposite of how the war was meant to be. So war is meant to target soldiers. Terrorism targets specifically civilians. Traditionally, when war was fought, at least in the past, not in the recent past, but in the distant past in India, it would be one soldier would not hit the other soldier unless that person was armed. It is not always followed, but that was the code that was there in the Bhagavad Gita war that is described. Now, if you consider specialize in attacking people who are unarmed, and not only that, there are people who are alert. So if the enemy is sleeping and then you attack them in their sleep, that's considered brutal, that's considered barbaric. But here it is, people are just going along their normal lives and suddenly a bomb explodes and people are killed. So that is horrendous. So that's unfortunate, actually, very
This kind of
unfortunate.
goes this kind of goes along with the clip we have of you on our Instagram with the what is it? Missiles with misguided men. Like, the problem is that we
Yeah, we
have
have
this really destructive technology in the hands. Yeah, what was that caption?
we have guided missiles and misguided men.
Yeah, guided missiles. So when I asked you that question about would have you made that decision to make that destructive technology, it's kind of an example of that, where it may not necessarily be the destructive technology that's as much of a problem as the misguided use of it.
Yes, good point. What we can try to do is we cannot stop having guided missiles, but that's a quote from Martin Luther King. He said, "Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men." So now we cannot stop the fact that there are going to be guided missiles, but what we can do is we can try to provide inner guidance more and more, and we can help people develop the inner resources by which they can have greater level of self-restraint. So in one sense, science can help us to guide missiles, but we need spirituality to guide human beings. We have discussed this earlier.
Wow.
Science is the study of matter. Spirituality is the study of what matters. What is how important in life? That is what spirituality studies. And we need this study also. It's
Yeah,
a
so if we
very,
really want to
yeah, go ahead.
optimize this equation, then we have to grow both of them at the same time, or it creates a disbalance or disharmony, and that's where destruction can come in. This is why I switched from the right side over to the left side.
Yeah, it's a good example. Good point. I would say this was also one of the reasons why I did the same thing. When I was studying, my dream was to become an astrophysicist. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
That's
okay,
awesome.
I've had many dreams. That was one of my dreams when I was studying in college. So I was studying in a place called Pune, and Pune has one of India's top space research institutes called Ayuka. So I'd gone there, met several scientists there, and I had this naive kind of idea that science is the pursuit of higher wisdom and is the pursuit of higher happiness and the pursuit of higher meaning in life. And there's definitely a part of that. I had read biographies of a lot of scientists. But when I went to meet some scientists over there, maybe I mean not maybe I was actually naive, but I saw that these scientists were the time that they look forward to. I did some project work with them. The time that they really look forward to was not the scientific research that they were doing, but after that, when they would go to a bar and hang out and drink and smoke. And I said, if you're really getting happiness in science, why do you need to? Why do you are so enthusiastic about drinking and smoking? These are things that everyone else is doing. So no, I didn't. It's not so much that I was judging them for judging the habits of drinking and smoking. They're unhealthy habits, but they are indulgences which are there in human society. But with my conception of science as a pursuit of higher wisdom, higher happiness, higher fulfillment, that was completely shattered by that. I said, okay, maybe there's not this. The scientific knowledge really doesn't. There must be something missing in this happiness. And these were brilliant scientists. They were among the best scientists in India at that time. So that's why I started thinking, where do you really find happiness? So that's where I started exploring spirit. That's one of the reasons why I started exploring spirituality.
That's amazing. CC, I feel like I want to give you a high five across the camera. I felt the very same way.
Yeah, let's accept it. Hmm. So now, can I go into my controversy part? Hmm. Or you want to
Please.
discuss? This is
Veda, do you have anything to add to this? You're kind of quiet.
I'm waiting to see how CC gets controversial.
okay. So basically, I commented on this movie, and I said that I was upfront. I told that I have not watched the movie, but I'm not commenting on the movie per se. I'm commenting on why Oppenheimer quoted the Bhagavad Gita. But then after that, on my YouTube and my personally on my WhatsApp and other places, I started getting messages. What is your comment about the nude scene in the movie? So now I had no idea there was nude scene, and then I look at the rating. It is adult rating, so apparently there's nudity over there. But what really irked Indians, uh, especially Indian Hindus, was that there's a scene where Oppenheimer is with his mistress and they are being physically intimate. And while they're doing that, she looks around, she sees his library, and so she just picks up a book and she reads a Sanskrit book. Can you read this? So then apparently while she is pleasuring him, he opens the book and he starts reading the Sanskrit. And she's very impressed and she pleasures him more because of that. So this triggered because the Bhagavad Gita is considered to be a holy book. And why would such a holy book be depicted in such a situation? If they wanted to depict how clever he was, how much he was fluent in Sanskrit, they could have done any other way. If they wanted to depict that maybe he was using his cleverness to impress and attract women, they could have done that also in some other way. In fact, the version of the movie that was released in America had many more explicit scenes than the version of the movie that was released in India. So there were some scenes that were cut out, and yet when the movie was released in India, and yet this scene was kept. So the anger in India was not just towards the movie makers, but also towards the Indian censor board. Why didn't it not
Was
consider
towards the what? Oh, the censoring.
the censor board of India? That why did it not consider this and eliminate have this removed? So that's what happened, and as of now, those scenes have not been removed, and the storm has, in at least in India, died down to some extent. In America, even there, although there is a significant demographic of American Indians, it seems that there was not that much of a opposition. Now, as far as I could find out, none of these biographies of Oppenheimer mention that an actual incident like this happened. But so first of all, it's not historically true. Secondly, is it artistic? Like there's some artistic creativity. Is it artistically necessary? That's the director's decision. But is it artistically necessary to have that scene? Is it artistically necessary? That's the art director's decision. But to have that scene and have the Bhagavad Gita recited at that time, that is what is a provocative decision. So that's what has irked people. And So my first videos seemed to be supporting the movie. I didn't specifically support the movie, but just explaining why, or how Oppenheimer quoted the Bhagavad Gita. But then so that led to the issue that am I supporting the depiction of nudity like that? Nudity while reciting the Bhagavad Gita. So then I made a second video saying that, this is unfortunate. This is insensitive. It's distressing and it's discordant. So that also involved some amount of feedback. So then some devotees, some of my friends from America, they pushed back and said that, why are you such a, what is the word? Why are you such a prude? They said that for so many people, this is their first introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. And as far as those kind of scenes of physical intimacy, they are everywhere there in movies. But for them, those scenes they see now anybody with the internet connection can see things like that. So the fact that they are encountering the Bhagavad Gita is what is important. They're coming to know about the Bhagavad Gita. They're hearing the Bhagavad Gita being quoted, and that will trigger their inquisitiveness about the Gita. So that's a positive. So why are you condemning the movie? So I tried to say I'm not at all condemning the movie. I made 2 videos, and my comment was more on the Gita, and the fact that the Gita is being quoted is appreciated. But in this context, it was gratuitous, it was provocative, and it was unfortunate. So so from the American perspective, there's a positive. That's why I talk about the intersection of popular culture in different ways. So in America, the fact that the Gita has come in the minds of people through this movie is still positive. But for Indians, Gita is already in the mind. So how the Gita has come in the movie becomes a little more important. And there's also one more point that there are some Western stereotypes about India. So one of the most popular books from India in the West, from ancient India in the West, is the Kama Sutra. This is often treated like the Indian sex manual. So the concern is that while the Bhagavad Gita is a philosophical book and the Kama Sutra is a very different kind of book, so the lumping the Bhagavad Gita with the Kama Sutra can also perpetuate some stereotypes. That is also a concern, but that's the broad controversy.
So it's perceived in India as like disrespectful.
Yeah, it's pursued as a insult in the name of art. So the question is immediately raised that would something have been done with the Bible or with the Quran? Hmm? So the Quran, obviously, it would not be done. With the Bible also, it's unlikely, although it might be done. So this is also, see what happens is the Gita in the West is seen more as a book of wisdom. In India, it is seen as a book of religious veneration. It is a book of wisdom, but it's additionally a book of religious veneration. So, for example, say if somebody took Plato's Republic, and or some other book like that, and they showed that in a scene like this, that is a book of wisdom. And a book of wisdom shown like this may not be the most appropriate, but it's not inflammatory, it's not provocative. So, but as I said, if the Bible or Quran were shown like that, that would definitely be provocative. So the Gita is different things for different people. And the fact that the Gita is a book of religious veneration for a significant number of people in the world is not something which should have been overlooked by the movie makers. So till now, as far as I've seen, they have not made, neither Christopher Nolan or anyone else has made any statement about it. But that was a controversy that came up, at least for a short while.
Well, I feel like I could see both sides of that. I feel like I can understand how people would perceive it as disrespectful and be kind of offended. You can also see how maybe Western people would say, well, I mean, it's better than not ever hearing about the Gita, at least. And And it's also a little bit of a sign of how degraded our society is in a way that we need something like that, like something so provocative as a sex scene where the Gita is spoken to spark people's interest. I mean, that's a little bit of a testament to our degradation, but at the same time, it's reality. So if that's what's sparking people's interest and making them open it, and almost like could be a launching pad to a deeper study and realization, is it a positive thing? Could it be a positive thing? Maybe.
Yeah, as I said, in principle, I feel that the fact that the Gita has been discussed is positive. At while we cannot have everything the way we want it to be in the world, but there are things which are unpalatable, and there are things which are unbearable. So personally, I find this unpalatable. I don't find it unbearable that the Gita was depicted in this way. But I understand those who find it unbearable. Mm,
Did he pause? I think he might have. I'm curious what you think too, Veda.
I think everyone paused. Or ceased. Okay, now it's working. You know, this whole notion of using these wisdom texts, it's very distasteful, right? And I also feel it's very hypocritical because it seems like the Western media, they hammer down on intolerance in India and in the Indian people and this right wing. They have all this terminologies that they use. And yet at the same time, they're quite happy to them by misusing a very sacred book that hurts the sentiments of billions of people. So I find these people quite hypocritical, this whole society of, and trying to impose their personal uh, morality and ethics onto the world as being absolute because they have control over the media. I find it quite distasteful. And I find the sages in India, even the general people, are extremely tolerant. Extremely tolerant. If this were to happen to any other book, there'll be a global revolution. But imagine 1.4 billion people. There's billions of Hindus around the world. And they're peaceful, they understand, they're giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. Yet at the same time, they will be the ones to be talked of being intolerant. So sometimes I feel this kind of mindset that we have in the world is really ignorance. It's really ignorant people, insensitive. And so therefore, I think that, I don't have a solution, but yet I feel that somehow if there was more awareness and they would really, really study the Gita, they would have a little bit more respect for it. And if people had a little bit more respect for, we respect people that are looking towards the East for solutions. Why don't we try to respect the people and try to understand them a little bit before we try to, intentionally or unintentionally hurt their sentiments? I think it's sad. And this is how we divide people. And unfortunately, even though I haven't seen this movie, I'm sure, there is a underlining message that they want to give, every movie has a message. And it seems like this message possibly, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional. There's possibly this intent to somehow rile up a certain section of the community. And it's distasteful.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that, as I said, that it was not necessary. The movie stands on its own merit. It attracts its own people. There is this phenomena that sometimes some movie directors, movie producers, you could not necessarily directors, who are the movie makers, they sometimes try to manufacture a controversy so that more people will see it. And it's not an uncommon strategy. But this movie has a excellent director, a well-reputed director. It has a big cast of again well-known actors. It has Oppenheimer has been an interesting figure in Western history, so it could stand on its own merit. It did not need to do this, and that's why the manufacturing the controversy, that's unfortunate. Now there is a feeling in India that there's a concerted attempt to demonize India and demonize everything Indian, and this is a part of that. So the idea, for example, is that in the Western, not necessarily in the yoga circles per se, but in the Western academia, in the Western mainstream media, what the way it is portrayed is that that now if you see from India, India has been the source of yoga. India has been the source of ahimsa. Ahimsa is non-violence. And India
Buddha.
that's a Buddha, that's vegetarianism, which results from that, and that is now led to veganism. But the way it is portrayed is that all these they come. Now India also unfortunately also had the caste system, which has been quite discriminatory. So what happens is that the caste system is attributed to Hinduism, and the yoga, ahimsa, and vegetarianism, they are attributed to the pre-Hindu religion or to Buddhism. So the idea is that okay, or what is there is what India does is worship of cows, which is seen as incomprehensible, is seen as foolish, is primitive. So there is this overall tendency to take the good that has come from India and culturally appropriate it or ascribe it to something other than the main religion of India. Now, whether this was a part of it, this whole thing is called as cultural appropriation. Now, Christopher Nolan, from what I read, he doesn't have any history of doing that. So whether he was a part of that agenda, I don't know. But that is also a part of the bigger picture, which riles some people, and hopefully the outcry over this will prevent similar things from occurring in the future. But what you said, Veda, is true that whenever there is any even a protest mentioned about this, the result is that immediately
Let them be.
Hindus are branded as right-wing extremists, intolerant. But actually, this that they've been tolerating quite a bit, and eventually everybody's tolerance has its limits. That's what has happened at present.
Yeah, what I liked about what Veda said when he said it was hypocritical, you think about how much sensitivity we try to have in our own cultures and societies with people. Even we've talked about a lot of the things on the show here, like gender and just different things that it's so politically correct to have so much sensitivity, but then we have so little sensitivity for another culture, and which
Yeah,
on
good
like a
point.
really it's it's interesting how we almost like limit the scope of our sensitivity. I don't know if that's out of ignorance or just out of this is what and who we respect, and this is what we're going to say is okay to cross the line on.
Yeah, I mean,
We
maybe I'll
have
make one concluding point.
creators, the morality.
Sorry?
What'd you say, Veda?
We have taken being the creator managed morality.
Yeah, that's a little scary. Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So I'll conclude with one point which I have emphasized to those who ask me this question is that it is, see, whenever something offensive happens, offensive event is there, something which you feel is insulting, disturbing. So at that time, if you're considering evaluating it, so broadly we could say that the causes can range from ignorance. They just didn't know it was offensive. It could be incompetence. It was their job to know and they didn't find it. They didn't do that job properly. Or it could be malevolence, where they are just evil people out to offend. Now, in general, I recommend that we start with this explanation. So this is the first explanation. Try to, like, say, give the benefit of the doubt. Don't assume that people are being malevolent. Then second is ignorant. Third is malevolent. So if we jump to the explanation that people who did this are malevolent, then that polarizes much more. And in general, in our life also, when somebody insults us, somebody disrespects us, if we are constantly jumping to the conclusion that people out there are malevolent, then that's actually, if you consider from the perspective of mental health, this is malefic. It is harmful. It is not beneficial. It's harmful for our mental health. So hopefully that message registered for at least some people, and the temperatures have gone down. So in this particular case, I would say that it was incompetence. At the least, it cannot be ignorance. No, okay. A person who did such exhaustive research to make a movie like this, that person would not know that the Gita is seen as a book of religious devotion. That seems stretching the limits of credibility, of not credibility, credulity. So it's unbelievable. So hopefully it is not malevolent, it is just incompetent. And it won't be a chapter that is repeated in the future.
Does incompetent in this context mean like they didn't understand the consequences of their actions, or what? How would you define incompetence in this context?
Yeah, they either didn't bother to do the research to know that the Gita is a book considered sacred by so many people, or they didn't really care for the consequences. So it's like, say, if a doctor prescribes a medicine
How's
and
that
the
different
patient,
than ignorant, I guess?
no, ignorance means, so I was giving the example to illustrate that point. As if a doctor prescribes a medicine and that medicine ends up making the patient worse. And then we find out that's a side effect of the medicine. So now, if that side effect was never known, neither to doctor, nor to the patient, nor to the medical community, then we could say, okay, the doctor was ignorant. But if the doctor did not look at the case study of the patient properly, the doctor did not keep in mind the various possible known side effects of that particular medication, the doctor administered the medicine, that would be incompetence. And the doctor deliberately wanted to harm the patient, and that would be malevolence.
Okay, so ignorance would be like completely uninformed.
Yeah.
Incompetence is like partially informed.
Because I didn't care to know.
Mm-hmm. This is really interesting, even for all of us too. When something happens to us, or we feel like we've been offended, to not automatically jump to 3, to kind of go through this process of ignorance, incompetence, and what's this word? Malevolent. How did you pronounce this? I'm so bad with pronunciation of words.
My God.
It's like one of my. It's actually quite embarrassing because I'm so bad at them. I can't remember how words go sometimes. Say it again.
Malevolence. At least that's the way I think it is pronounced.
Malevolence.
Malevolence. Malevolence.
Okay.
Like we have benevolence,
Trust you.
malevolence.
Okay. No. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that process that you just put out there. Thank you.
Happy. So, Veda, do you want to say something concluding or should I summarize? We went a little overtime today.
Yeah, please summarize.
Okay, it is malevolence. Malevolence. Malevolence.
Malevolence.
Okay, so we discussed primarily about how there's an object and then there's a conception of the object and how they're different often. Object or substance, the substance, and then there's the conception of the substance, and how our theme was how the Gita is substance and how it is pursued differently in the West and in India. That was the broad theme that we discussed, and within that discussed Oppenheimer's movie and the history of him quoting the Gita, how the Gita helped him find meaning, some meaning amid the ethical dilemma and also so it's like you had two good people who have Arjuna was a good person who had no good options, and then also and there was the idea of see divinity in destruction. That is the two meanings of the word awe as awesome and awful. So both of them are slightly older meanings. We see something far greater than ourselves and we feel filled with positivity, that's awesome, or we feel filled with negativity. Then we discuss basically briefly the ethics of weapons of mass destruction. And within that, the conclusion more or less was that we cannot stop science from weapons development, from guiding missiles, but we can have spirituality guiding humans better. So science is the study of matter, spirituality is the study of what matters. And the last part we discussed was about
Ooh, I like that.
we talked about sensitivity, and the controversy in India arose from two different conceptions of the Gita. The Gita as a book of wisdom and veneration. So it is good to assume, it is distressing that the Gita was depicted during a sex scene, but it is helpful to assume that that particular depiction was due to more of either ignorance or incompetence rather than malevolence. So anything you want to add? Yeah, I think I elaborated. Science is the study of matter and spirituality is the study of what matters. I mentioned that and I was
Yeah,
surprised.
you didn't say that phrase though. That's the first time.
No, I wrote it down.
You mentioned it.
Oh,
Yeah,
did he?
I was
okay.
surprised that there was no reaction to that.
Missed it.
So where did I say it?
I missed it. I would have reacted because that's awesome. That should be on our Instagram. Brittany missed it too. All right,
Science is the study of matter. Spirituality is the study of what matters.
That's good. That's great. Well, thank you so much for all of that, CC and Veda. That's really appreciate all of your guys' wisdom and perspectives. Just a couple announcements before we end here. If you haven't checked out our Instagram, please do Seekers Quest 108. And also on our Instagram and our bio, we have a button. You can check out our website and you can check out, we have a donor box there. So if you're getting something out of the podcast and you want to support us, we do have some expenses. So it would be great if you wanted to pledge a monthly donation. If not, you could share our videos and our podcast to your social media and maybe we can grow our community, help us somehow in expanding this wisdom and knowledge and outreach. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Namaste. Everyone.